Hi, I'm Alexis, and this is the story of how my parents emptied my college fund for my sister's wedding. No joke. They drained the account my grandparents had set up for me since birth, like my future was disposable, like my dreams didn't matter. But that wasn't the real betrayal. The real heartbreak came when they showed up at my apartment door 6 months later, desperate for my signature on a scholarship form they'd been hiding from me. Before we dive in, tell me, have you ever felt like the backup plan in your own family? Drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from. This is family drama you don't want to miss. I remember the day perfectly. It was late August, the kind of thick summer heat that made even the shortest walk feel like trudging through molasses. I'd just finished my shift at the Veteran Support Center where I volunteered 3 days a week. The work was emotionally draining but fulfilling, helping former service members navigate the labyrinth of paperwork for their benefits, listening to their stories, being the patient voice on the other end of the phone when systems failed them. I pulled into my parents' driveway, already dreading the conversation ahead. I needed to access my college fund, the one my grandparents had established the day I was born, the one that had been growing for 21 years. Fall semester was starting in 3 weeks, and tuition was due. This was supposed to be simple. The money was mine, had always been promised to me. The house looked the same as always, colonial style, navy blue shutters, my mother's hydrangeas blooming by the front steps. Inside, the air conditioning was blasting. Mom was at the kitchen island, scrolling through her tablet. Dad was nowhere to be seen, probably in his study on a work call. The smell of lemon cleaner hung in the air. "Hey, sweetie," Mom said, barely looking up. "There's iced tea in the fridge if you want some." I declined, settling across from her at the island. "I need to talk to you and Dad about the college fund. The tuition bill came in higher than expected, and I'll need to withdraw a bit more than we discussed." Her fingers froze over the screen. Something shifted in her expression. A flash of panic, quickly replaced by a carefully composed smile. "Let me get your father," she said, sliding off the stool. I sat alone in the kitchen, tracing condensation patterns on the marble countertop. Photos of my sister Vanessa covered the refrigerator. Vanessa at her college graduation, Vanessa with her fiancé Thomas, Vanessa trying on wedding dresses. My own photo was there too, smaller, taken 3 years ago at my high school graduation. Nothing more recent. When my parents returned, they weren't alone. Vanessa was with them, though she wasn't supposed to be visiting until the weekend. She gave me a quick wave but didn't quite meet my eyes. Dad cleared his throat. "Alexis, there's something we need to discuss." Their words came in careful fragments, piecing together a story that didn't make sense at first. Economic downturn, investment, losses, wedding expenses, temporary borrowing, eventual repayment. "Wait," I interrupted, the room suddenly feeling airless. "Are you saying you used my college fund for Vanessa's wedding?" The silence confirmed it before anyone spoke. "Not all of it," my mother finally said, her voice high and thin. "Just most of it. We had every intention of replacing it," Dad added quickly. "But the market hasn't recovered the way we expected, and how much is left?" I asked, cutting him off. More silence. Then, $812. The number hit me like physical pain. $812 out of nearly $60,000. Vanessa wouldn't meet my eyes, suddenly fascinated by her engagement ring. 3 carats, emerald cut, platinum band. The wedding venue required a significant deposit, Dad explained. And then there were the flowers, the catering change when the first company fell through. I stared at him, this man who had taught me about financial responsibility since I was old enough to count, who had made me save birthday money and babysitting cash, who had lectured me about the importance of living within my means. "You promised," I said, my voice barely audible. "That money was for my education. Grandma and Grandpa set it up specifically. For me?" "And you'll still get your education," Mom interjected brightly. There are student loans, work-study programs, which I wouldn't have needed if you hadn't taken my money for a party. Vanessa flinched. It wasn't just a party, Alexis. It was my wedding. I turned to her, my sister, 3 years older and always center stage. A wedding you could have scaled back, or paid for yourselves. Thomas's family has money. They contributed. Their share, my father said. But costs kept rising, and we had to make a decision. And they had. They'd decided my future was less important than my sister's perfect day. I stood up, my chair scraping against the tile floor. I start classes in 3 weeks. Tuition is due in 10 days. What am I supposed to do? My mother reached for my hand. I pulled away. We'll figure it out together, she said. Your father is expecting a bonus next quarter. We can start replacing the funds then. Next quarter. Months away. After tuition was due. After I would have had to drop out or take on massive debt. I need to go, I said, grabbing my keys. My father called after me. Alexis, don't be dramatic. This is a family matter. We'll solve it as a family. I paused at the door. You already solved it. You chose Vanessa. Again. The drive back to my apartment was a blur. Tears made the road waver, but I didn't let them fall. Not yet. I had calculations to make, calls to place, realities to face. My apartment was small. 1 bedroom with scuffed hardwood floors and windows that rattled when the wind blew. But it was mine, paid for with my job at the campus bookstore and weekend shifts at a coffee shop. I'd been proud of managing it on my own, of not asking my parents for rent money. Now I understood why. There was no money to ask for. I sat at my tiny kitchen table and opened my laptop. Student loans would take weeks to process, even if I qualified. I had savings, but nowhere near enough. My job couldn't cover even a quarter of the tuition. I was going to have to drop out, at least for a semester, maybe longer. The realization settled like concrete in my stomach. This wasn't just about money. It was about value, about worth, about who mattered in our family equation. My phone buzzed, with text from my mother, apologizing, promising to make it right, asking me not to be angry. I didn't respond. Instead, I opened a new browser tab and started researching scholarships. Most deadlines had passed months ago, but there had to be something. Anything. 3 hours later, eyes burning from staring at the screen, I found it. The Henderson Memorial Scholarship for students pursuing education in social services, specifically those working with veterans. It covered full tuition for 2 years. The application deadline was the next day. I worked through the night, writing essays, gathering transcripts, securing last-minute recommendation letters from my supervisors at the Veterans Center. By dawn, everything was ready except for one component. The financial disclosure form required a parent's signature since I was still listed as a dependent on their taxes. I drove to my parents' house at 7 a.m., application folder clutched to my chest. Dad answered the door in his bathrobe, coffee mug in hand. I need your signature, I said, holding out the form. It's for a scholarship. Full tuition. The deadline is today. He took the paper, scanning it with sleepy eyes. Alexis, these kinds of scholarships are incredibly competitive. You can't pin all your hopes on. Just sign it, I said. Please. He sighed but reached for a pen. As he was about to sign, his phone rang. He glanced at the screen. It's the wedding planner. 1 second. He set the form down and walked away, taking the call in his study. I stood in the entryway, the unsigned form mocking me. 10 minutes passed, 20. When he finally emerged, he was dressed for work. Sorry about that. There's an issue with the venue again. He grabbed his briefcase. Can I take this with me? I'll need to review the financial disclosures more carefully. The deadline is 5 p.m. today, I reminded him. Online submission. I'll get it back to you in time, he promised, slipping the form into his briefcase before I could protest. He didn't. At 3 p.m., I called him, straight to voicemail. I texted, no response. At 4 p.m., I drove to his office, only to be told by his assistant that he was in meetings all afternoon. I sat in the lobby, watching the minutes tick by on my phone. 4:30, 4:40. At 4:50, I approached the assistant again. Please, it's important. It's just a signature. She gave me a sympathetic look. I'll try again, but he's with the partners right now. At 4:58, with 2 minutes until the deadline, my father finally appeared in the lobby. He looked surprised. To see me. Alexis, what are you doing here? The form, I said, my voice tight. The scholarship deadline is in 2 minutes. Recognition dawned on his face. Right, of course. I have it here somewhere. He rummaged through his briefcase, finally extracting the crumpled form. Let me just find a pen. I have one, I said, thrusting a pen at him. He signed without reading, his usual meticulous attention to detail abandoned in his haste. I snatched the form back, ran to my car, and submitted the application from my phone at exactly 5:01 p.m. 1 minute late. I didn't know if they would accept it. I didn't know if I stood a chance. But sitting there in the parking lot of my father's office building, I realized something that changed everything. I wasn't the backup plan in my family's story. I was the footnote. 3 days passed with no word about the scholarship. I threw myself into work, picking up extra shifts at the coffee shop and the bookstore. My manager at the Veteran Center, Maria, noticed the change in me. The dark circles under my eyes, the forced smile, the way I jumped. Every time my phone buzzed. Everything okay? She asked during a quiet moment between appointments. I hesitated. I didn't talk about family problems, especially not at work. But Maria wasn't just my boss. She'd become a mentor over the past year, showing me what it meant to advocate for others with unwavering dedication. My parents emptied my college fund, I said finally. The words felt strange in the open air. For my sister's wedding. Maria's expression shifted from concern to something harder. The fund your grandparents set up for you? I nodded. $60,000. Gone. Except for $812. She sat back in her chair. And what are they doing to fix it? Promising to replace it, eventually. After the wedding, after my tuition is due. So what's your plan? I told her about the Henderson scholarship, the last-minute application, my father's delayed signature. I submitted it 1 minute late. I said, I don't know if they'll even consider it. Maria was quiet for a moment. I know someone on the selection committee, she said finally. I can't influence their decision, but I can at least make sure they don't disqualify you for being 60 seconds past deadline. Relief washed over me. You'd do that? Of course I would. You're one of the hardest workers I've ever had. The veterans. Here ask for you by name. She leaned forward. But, Alexis, regardless of the scholarship outcome, you need to address this with your parents. This isn't just about money. I looked away. It's always been like this. Vanessa first, me second. Then, maybe it's time they heard how that feels. I changed the subject, turning attention back to the day's appointments, but Maria's words stayed with me. Maybe it was time. But the thought of confrontation made my stomach churn. When I got home that evening, Vanessa was waiting outside my apartment door. She looked out of place in the dingy hallway with her perfect blowout and designer jeans. Can we talk? She asked as I approached. I unlocked the door without answering, but left it open for her to follow. My apartment, which had always felt like a haven, suddenly seemed shabby through her eyes. The secondhand furniture, the patched curtains, the coffee mug collection that served as my main decor. Vanessa perched on the edge of my sofa like she was afraid it might stain her clothes. Mom said you're upset about the college fund. I barked out a laugh. Upset? They stole from me, Vanessa, for your wedding. A wedding with a string quartet and imported flowers and custom cocktails. I didn't know they were using your money, she said quickly. Thomas and I thought they were covering their portion from their savings. I swear, I wanted to believe her. Part of me did, but another part remembered how she'd avoided eye contact at our parents' house, how she hadn't seemed surprised by the revelation. "Did you know I'd been planning to quit one of my jobs this semester?" I asked, opening the refrigerator to avoid looking at her. "Focus more on my studies, maybe take an extra class. That's not happening now." "I'm sorry," she said softly. "Truly. But I don't understand why you're acting like Mom and Dad abandoned you. They're trying to help you find alternatives." I slammed the refrigerator door. "Alternatives I wouldn't need if they hadn't taken what was mine. It wasn't technically yours until—" "Don't." My voice was low, dangerous. "Do not try to justify this with technicalities. That money was for my education. It was given to me by our grandparents. It was my future." Vanessa flinched. "I didn't come here to fight. I came to help." "How? Are you going to give back the $15,000 for the venue? The $8,000 for the flowers? The custom-designed dress?" She looked down at her hands, at the massive engagement ring that caught the light. "We could postpone the wedding, scale back, use some of the deposits to replenish your fund." For a moment, hope flickered. Then reality extinguished it. Dad would never allow it. He's already told everyone at his firm about the wedding. Mom's been planning this for months. Your future in-laws have booked their flights. "But if it means you can stay in school?" "Does it?" I challenged. "Would you actually postpone your perfect day for me? Or are you just saying that because it sounds good?" Hurt flashed across her face. "That's not fair." "None of this is fair, Vanessa." We sat in silence, the apartment suddenly too small for both of us and the weight of what had happened. "I could loan you some money," she finally offered. "Not all of it, but enough to cover this semester while you figure things out." Pride rose like bile in my throat. "I don't want your loan. I don't want your guilt money. I want what was promised to me, what was stolen from me." "Then what do you want from me right now?" Her voice cracked slightly. The question hung between us. What did I want from her? An apology wouldn't pay my tuition. Sympathy wouldn't keep me in school. "I want you to go," I said finally. "I have work early tomorrow." She stood, smoothing invisible wrinkles from her pants. "I'm trying, Alexis." "No," I said. "You're feeling guilty. There's a difference." After she left, I sat alone in my quiet apartment. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother, asking if I'd seen Vanessa, if we'd had a good talk. I didn't respond. Instead, I pulled out my laptop and began searching for affordable apartments in Chicago. 4 hours away. Far enough that surprise visits wouldn't be possible. Far enough to breathe. On Friday afternoon, 1 week after submitting the scholarship application, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. I stepped outside the bookstore to answer it. "Is this Alexis Mitchell?" a woman's voice asked. "Yes. This. Is she?" "This is Dr. Eleanor Feng with the Henderson Memorial Scholarship Committee. Do you have a moment to talk?" My heart stuttered. "Yes, of course. I'm calling about your application. It was quite impressive. Your academic record, your commitment to veteran services, your essays. The committee was particularly moved by your personal statement about witnessing your grandfather's struggle with accessing his veteran benefits before his passing." "Thank you," I managed. "However," she continued, "there seems to be a discrepancy in your financial disclosure form." Ice flooded my veins. "What kind of discrepancy?" "According to the information provided and signed by your father, your family has significant financial resources. The Henderson Scholarship is intended for students with demonstrated financial need." "My family does have resources," I said carefully, "but they're not available to me for my education. My parents repurposed my college fund for my sister's wedding." Silence. On the line. Then, "That's quite a statement, Ms. Mitchell." "It's the truth. My family appears financially stable on paper, but I'm about to have to drop out because I can't pay tuition. Dr. Feng's voice softened slightly. I see. That's an unusual circumstance. Would you be willing to provide some additional documentation? Bank statements showing the withdrawal, perhaps? I don't have access to those records, I admitted. The account was in my parents' names until I turned 21. I only found out it had been emptied when I tried to access it last week. Another pause. I understand this is difficult, but without documentation, the committee can only go by the financial disclosure form, which indicates your parents have the ability to contribute significantly to your education. The form my father signed without reading, I said bitterly. I'm sorry? I took a deep breath. Nothing. I understand. Thank you for your consideration. Ms. Mitchell, wait, Dr. Feng said before I could hang up. I'd like to offer you an opportunity to appeal this decision. Submit a letter explaining your situation in detail, and if possible, have your parents provide a statement confirming the reallocation of your education funds. The committee meets again next Wednesday. It was a lifeline, thin but real. Thank you, I'll do that. After the call ended, I stood outside the bookstore, watching students cross the quad with backpacks and coffee cups, their biggest worry whether to attend a party that weekend or which class to drop. Normal college concerns, not whether they'd be in college at all in 2 weeks. I texted my father, need to talk, important. Scholarship committee needs a letter from you confirming what happened to my college fund. His reply came an hour later. Can't talk now. In meetings until dinner. What exactly do they need? I typed back. The truth. No response after that. When my shift ended, I drove to my parents' house. Their driveway was full, my mother's SUV, my father's sedan, and Vanessa's sporty convertible. Plus a catering van, I'd forgotten. Tonight was the engagement dinner. 40 guests, 4 courses, the official merging of families before the wedding. Another expense. Another celebration that hadn't included me. I hesitated at the front door, hearing laughter and music inside. Then I rang the doorbell. A server in black and white answered, surprise evident on his face. He clearly wasn't expecting more guests. I'm here to see Richard Mitchell, I said. I'm his daughter. The dinner is in progress, he explained apologetically. Perhaps you could come back. My father appeared behind him, drink in hand, face flushed with the confidence of a host in his element. His smile faltered when he saw me. Alexis, we weren't expecting you. Clearly. I gestured at my jeans and work polo shirt. Can we talk? It's about the scholarship. He glanced over his shoulder toward the dining room. Now isn't a good time. We have guests, including Thomas's parents. They flew in from Seattle. Of course they did. Of course this dinner took priority. Of course I was an inconvenience. It will only take a few minutes, I pressed. The committee needs a letter from you explaining the situation with my college fund. They think I'm lying about needing financial aid. Alexis, please. His voice dropped to a harsh whisper. Not tonight. We can discuss this tomorrow. From the dining room, my mother called. Richard? Who is it? Just a delivery mix-up, he called back. To me, he said, I'll call you first thing in the morning. We'll sort this out. Before I could respond, he stepped back and closed the door. Just like that. Door closed, daughter dismissed. I stood on the porch, the sounds of the dinner party spilling out through open windows, clinking glasses, polite laughter, my sister's voice carrying over the rest, my mother announcing a toast. My father's deep chuckle at someone's joke, a family celebration happening 5 feet away from where I stood, uninvited and unwelcome. In that moment, I realized I wasn't just fighting for tuition money. I was fighting to matter. The following morning, no call came from my father. I stared at my phone throughout my early shift at the coffee shop, watching the screen remain stubbornly dark as I steamed milk and called out orders. By noon, when my break rolled around, I couldn't wait any longer. I called him. The call went straight to voicemail, his professional greeting, clipped and formal. I didn't leave a message. This wasn't something that could be explained in a 60-second recording. I tried my mother next. She answered on the fourth ring, her voice hushed. "Alexis, hi. I'm at the bridal salon with Vanessa. Can I call you back later?" The bridal salon. "Of course. It's important, Mom. The scholarship committee needs a letter from Dad explaining the situation with my college fund. Without it, I won't qualify for financial aid." Oh. A pause. "Well, I'm sure we can figure something out. But right now I'm in the middle of—" "Mom," I interrupted. "This is my education, my future. And I said we'll figure it out." Her voice had taken on that edge, the one that meant the conversation was over. "Your father has meetings all day, but I'll tell him to call you tonight." In the background, I heard a saleswoman's enthusiastic voice, then Vanessa's delighted exclamation. "Mom? Did you hear me?" "Yes, yes. Tonight. I have to go now, Alexis. Vanessa just found the perfect veil." The call ended. I sat on the back step of the coffee shop, surrounded by empty milk crates and the smell of garbage. The perfect veil. Another expense. Another priority that wasn't me. I scrolled through my contacts until I found Dr. Feng's number from yesterday. Before I could second-guess myself, I dialed. Dr. Feng speaking. "This is Alexis Mitchell. About the letter from my parents." "Yes, Ms. Mitchell." "They're not going to provide it." My voice was flat. "They're busy with my sister's wedding preparations." A brief silence. "I see. That's unfortunate. Is there any other way? Any documentation I could provide instead?" "The committee requires verification of financial circumstances. Without it—" She trailed off, but her meaning was clear. Without it, no scholarship. "What if I could get statements from the bank?" I suggested desperately. "Or what if I filed for independent student status?" "Independent status is a lengthy process," she explained gently. "It wouldn't be resolved before the fall semester begins. As for bank statements, they would need to clearly show the transfer of funds from your education account to wedding expenses." An idea sparked. "My grandparents established the account. Would a statement from them help?" "Potentially, yes. If they could verify the original intent of the funds and their knowledge of how the money was used instead." My grandmother. Why hadn't I thought of her before? "Thank you, Dr. Feng. I'll be in touch." I finished my shift in a daze, spilling 2 lattes and mixing up orders, earning irritated glances from my supervisor. As soon as I clocked out, I drove to the retirement community where my grandmother had lived since my grandfather's death 3 years earlier. Willow Ridge was a sprawling complex of tidy cottages and a central community building. My grandmother's unit sat near the back, overlooking a koi pond. I hadn't visited in nearly 2 months. Work and school had consumed my time, and she wasn't one for phone calls. She answered her door wearing gardening gloves, her silver hair tied back in a neat bun. Her face lit up when she saw me. "Alexis! What a lovely surprise!" She pulled off the gloves and reached for a hug. Come in. Come in." I was just about to make iced tea. Her cottage was exactly as I remembered. Photographs covering every surface, plants crowding the windowsills, books stacked on every flat surface. It smelled of lemon and soil and the lavender sachets she tucked into drawers. I followed her to the small kitchen, watching as she filled a pitcher with tea and added sprigs of mint from her windowsill herb garden. "So," she said, setting to. Glasses on the table. "What brings you by on a Saturday? Not that I'm complaining." I took a deep breath. "Grandma, did you know Mom and Dad used my college fund to pay for Vanessa's wedding?" The glass stilled halfway to her lips. "What did you just say?" "The college fund you and Grandpa set up for me. It's gone. They spent it on the wedding." She set the glass down carefully. How much is gone? All but $800, out of 60,000. Her expression hardened, reminding me suddenly of old photographs I'd seen of her as a young woman, the determined set of her jaw, the fire in her eyes. "Tell me everything," she said. So I did. The discovery, the scholarship application, my father's failure to sign the form on time, the committee's request for verification, my parents' continued prioritization of the wedding. By the time I finished, my grandmother had gone very still, her tea untouched. "Your grandfather would be livid," she said finally. "That money was for your education. Period. That was the explicit agreement when we set up those accounts. One for you, one for Vanessa." "Vanessa's account too?" "Of course. Equal amounts for both our granddaughters. Richard was trustee until you both turned 21. I did the math quickly." "Vanessa turned 21 3 years ago. She should have had access to her own fund." My grandmother's eyes narrowed. "Yes, she should have." She rose from the table with surprising quickness for a woman of 78 and went to a roll-top desk in the corner. After rummaging through several drawers, she extracted a leather-bound folder. "Your grandfather kept copies of everything," she explained, returning to the table. "Financial agreements, account numbers, the terms of the trusts." She flipped through the pages, her finger skimming down columns of numbers and legal language. "Here it is. Vanessa's Education Trust, accessible to her directly upon turning 21. And yet, they're using your fund for her wedding?" She shook her head. "It doesn't make sense." A cold feeling settled in my stomach. Unless her fund is also gone," my grandmother finished. "Richard, what have you done?" She flipped through more pages, then reached for her phone. "I'm calling the bank. I'm still a signatory on these trusts." While she made the call, I sat frozen, processing the implications. If Vanessa's fund was also gone, where had that money gone? And why take mine too? My grandmother's conversation with the bank was brief but illuminating. After providing several verification details, she listened intently, her expression growing harder by the second. When she hung up, she looked at me with a mixture of anger and determination. "Vanessa's fund was emptied 2 years ago. A series of withdrawals over 6 months. For what? The bank couldn't tell me that, but given the timing..." She paused, calculating. "That would have been right around when your father's investment firm had those layoffs, when they were restructuring." The pieces clicked into place. My father hadn't lost his job in the restructuring, but he'd emerged with a different title, a smaller office. There had been tense conversations behind closed doors, my mother cutting back on her charity committee memberships, a vacation canceled. "They were in financial trouble," I said slowly. "They used Vanessa's fund to stay afloat. And now they're using yours for appearances, for keeping up the facade of success with this extravagant wedding." My grandmother's voice was cold with fury. Richard was always concerned with appearances, but to steal from his children's futures. "What can we do?" I asked, feeling oddly detached. "The tuition deadline is in 4 days. My grandmother stood up, decision made. "First, I'm writing that letter for your scholarship committee. As a co-founder of the trust, my statement should carry weight. Second, I'm calling your parents." She picked up her phone again, dialing with sharp jabs of her finger. The call went to voicemail. She left a message that made me flinch with its controlled rage. "Richard, this is your mother. I know what you've done with the girls' education trusts, both of them. You have exactly 2 hours to call me back before I take this matter further. And believe me, you don't want me to take it further." She hung up and turned to me. Now we wait. But not for long. True to her word, my father called back in less than 20 minutes. My grandmother put the call on speaker. "Mom, this isn't a good time. We're at the florist with the Haywards." "I don't care if you're having tea with the Queen," my grandmother replied. "You stole from your daughters. $60,000 from Vanessa 2 years ago, and now $60,000 from Alexis for this ridiculous wedding charade. Silence on the line. Then, that's a very serious accusation. It's not an accusation. It's a fact. I've spoken to the bank, Richard. I know the accounts are empty. Those funds were legally in my name as trustee. It was a temporary reallocation of resources during a difficult period. Stop. My grandmother's voice could have cut steel. You can lie to your country club friends. You can lie to yourself. But don't you dare lie to me. You took money specifically designated for your daughter's education and used it to maintain your lifestyle and social standing. Mom, you don't understand. The pressure, I understand perfectly. Your pride was more important than your children's futures. And now Alexis is about to lose her place at university because you're too much of a coward to admit what you've done. My father's voice hardened. This is between me and my daughters. With all due respect, it's not your place to interfere. It became my place the moment you violated the trust your father and I placed in you. Now, here's what's going to happen. You're going to write a letter for Alexis's scholarship committee, detailing exactly what happened to her education fund. You're going to do it today. That's out of the question. Do you know what that would do to my reputation? To the family's standing? My grandmother laughed, a short, harsh sound. Your reputation? You should be worried about criminal charges for misappropriation of funds. You wouldn't. Try me, Richard. Your father kept meticulous records. The intent of those trusts was explicitly documented. Alexis needs that letter by Monday. And if I refuse? My grandmother looked at me, her eyes clear and determined. Then, I'll write it myself. And I'll include documentation showing that you deliberately misappropriated funds from both trusts. How do you think Thomas's parents will feel about that? How will it affect your standing at the firm if clients learn you can't even manage your own children's education funds? The threat hung in the air between them. I held my breath. Finally, my father spoke, his voice tight. I'll have something for Alexis by tomorrow evening. Not good enough. By noon. Delivered to her apartment. And Richard, it better tell the complete truth. She ended the call without waiting for his response. The silence that followed felt charged, like the air before a storm. My grandmother reached across the table and took my hand. Your grandfather used to say that family loyalty means nothing if it only flows upward. Her fingers tightened around mine. Your parents forgot that, but I haven't. What if he doesn't write the letter? I asked. Then I will. And I'll make sure the consequences are far worse than a damaged reputation. She smiled grimly. Richard always underestimated me, just like he underestimated you. For the first time, in days, I felt something like hope. Not because I believed my father would suddenly develop a conscience, but because I wasn't fighting alone anymore. Thank you, I said simply. My grandmother squeezed my hand. Now, tell me about this scholarship. And then let's talk about what happens if you don't get it. Because no matter what, Alexis, you will finish your education. I promise you that. The letter arrived at exactly 11:58 a.m. the next day. Not by my father's hand, he sent his personal assistant, a young woman in crisp business attire who looked deeply uncomfortable with her mission. She handed me a sealed envelope without making eye contact. Mr. Mitchell asked me to deliver this personally and confirm receipt, she said, her voice professionally neutral despite the awkwardness of the situation. I signed her little receipt form, watching as she hurried back to her car, a luxury sedan with my father's firm's parking permit on the windshield. Even in this, he couldn't face me himself. The envelope was heavy, expensive stationery, the kind my father reserved for important clients. I sat at my kitchen table to open it, heart pounding. The letter inside was typed on my father's personal letterhead, his signature at the bottom looking hastier than usual, as if he couldn't bear to linger over it. To the Henderson Memorial Scholarship Committee. I am writing to verify the financial circumstances of my daughter, Alexis Mitchell. Despite what our family's financial disclosures may suggest, Alexis does not have access to funds for her education due to a reallocation of resources that occurred without her knowledge or consent. The education trust established for Alexis by her grandparents, valued at approximately $60,000, was repurposed earlier this year to cover various family expenses, including costs associated with her sister's upcoming wedding. This decision was made solely by myself and my wife, without consulting Alexis. She was informed of this reallocation only when she attempted to access these funds for her fall tuition payment, at which point all but $812 had been removed from the account. While our family tax returns indicate financial stability, the liquid assets available for Alexis's education have been depleted. We are not in a position to replace these funds before the upcoming semester. Alexis has worked diligently throughout her time at university, maintaining excellent academic standing while supporting herself with part-time employment. Her dedication to veteran services demonstrates her commitment to public service and community support. I respectfully request that the committee consider her application based on her current financial reality rather than our family's apparent resources. Sincerely, Richard Mitchell. I read it 3 times, searching for loopholes, for subtle blame shifting, for anything that might undermine my case. But it was straightforward, almost clinical in its admission. My father had done exactly what my grandmother demanded, no more, no less. There was no apology, no recognition of betrayal, no acknowledgement of harm done, just facts, laid out in careful language that admitted wrongdoing while minimizing emotional impact. Typical dad. I took a photo of the letter and texted it to my grandmother. Her response came seconds later. "It will do. Get it to the committee immediately." I drove to campus with the letter clutched in my hand, half expecting it to disappear if I loosened my grip. Dr. Feng's office was in the Social Sciences building, a converted Victorian house with creaking floors and narrow hallways. Her assistant directed me to leave the letter in her mailbox, as she was teaching a seminar. Instead of heading back to my apartment, I found myself walking to the Veteran Center. It wasn't my shift, but the familiar space felt like sanctuary after the chaos of the past week. Maria was at the front desk, sorting through intake forms. She looked up when I entered. "Alexis? I thought you were off today." "I am. I hesitated, then held up the letter. "My father wrote it, for the scholarship committee." Maria's eyebrows rose. "He admitted to taking your money?" "In the most sterile, emotionless way possible, yes." She gestured to the chair beside her desk. "Want to talk about it?" I sank into the seat, suddenly exhausted. "My grandmother made him do it. Turns out he took my sister's fund 2 years ago, when his firm was struggling. And now he's throwing a lavish wedding to keep up appearances?" "Exactly." I traced the edge of the envelope with my fingertip. "The weird thing is, I don't even feel angry anymore. Just empty. Like I've been fighting for so long to be seen by them. And now I realize they've never really looked." Maria nodded slowly. "I've seen it with veterans sometimes. They come home from serving, expecting to be welcomed as family, and instead find themselves invisible. The hurt goes beyond the practical problems. It's the betrayal of the unspoken contract. I matter to you, you matter to me. Yes." The simple word felt inadequate for the complex tangle of emotions inside me. That's exactly it. So what now? I took a deep breath. Now I wait for the committee's decision, and I figure out who I am outside of my family's shadow. "That's a lifetime project," Maria said with a wry smile. "But a worthy one." Before I could respond, my phone buzzed with a text from Vanessa. "We need to talk. Grandma called me. Dinner tonight? My treat." I stared at the message, torn between curiosity and self-protection. What could Vanessa possibly say that would matter now? "My sister wants to meet for dinner," I told Maria. Says our grandmother called her. Are you going to go? I don't know. I set the phone down. Part of me wants to hear what she has to say. Another part thinks it's just going to be excuses and justifications. Or maybe she didn't know either, Maria suggested gently. About her own fund being gone. The possibility hadn't occurred to me. Had Vanessa been kept in the dark too? Was she just another prop in my parents' performance of prosperity? I picked up my phone and typed 7 p.m. The diner on Westfield. Not somewhere fancy. Vanessa's reply was immediate. I'll be there. I pocketed my phone, feeling strangely calm. Whatever came next, the scholarship decision, dinner with Vanessa, the inevitable confrontation with my parents, I would face it standing on my own ground. Thank you, I said to Maria, rising from the chair. For everything. She smiled. You've got this, Alexis. And remember, the people who see your worth don't need to be convinced of it. I stepped out of the center into the bright afternoon sunlight, breathing deeply. For the first time in days, the air tasted like possibility instead of loss. The diner on Westfield was nothing like the upscale restaurants Vanessa usually preferred. Fluorescent lighting cast everything in a harsh glow. The vinyl booths had seen better decades, and the menu offered comfort food at student-friendly prices. I chose it deliberately, neutral territory where designer clothes and perfect makeup felt out of place. I arrived 15 minutes early, sliding into a corner booth with a clear view of the entrance. The waitress, a woman in her 50s with faded tattoos peeking from beneath her uniform sleeves, brought me coffee without asking. You look like you need it, honey, she said with a wink. I wrapped my hands around the mug, drawing warmth from the chipped ceramic. Outside, rain had started to fall, streaking the windows and turning the neon diner sign into a blur of color against the darkening sky. Vanessa arrived exactly on time, shaking water from her umbrella before tucking it neatly by the door. She spotted me immediately, weaving between tables with the practiced grace of someone used to being watched. Even in jeans and a simple sweater, she looked like she'd stepped out of a catalog, not a hair out of place, not a moment of uncertainty in her stride. But as she slid into the booth across from me, I noticed things I hadn't before. The shadows beneath her carefully applied concealer, the slight redness around her eyes, the way her smile didn't quite reach them. Thanks for meeting me, she said, shrugging off her light jacket. The waitress appeared with a second mug and the coffee pot before I could respond. Vanessa ordered without looking at the menu. Just a cup of tea, nothing to eat. I asked for the breakfast special, suddenly hungry despite the tension knotting my stomach. When we were alone again, silence stretched between us, vast and uncertain. Grandma called you, I finally said, less a question than a prompt. Vanessa nodded, fingertips tracing patterns on the tabletop. She told me everything. About my fund being emptied 2 years ago. About them taking yours for the wedding. She looked up, meeting my eyes directly. I had no idea, Alexis, about any of it. The raw honesty in her voice caught me off guard. Vanessa had always been poised, controlled, the perfect daughter who never let the mask slip. Now she looked shaken, the carefully constructed image cracking at the edges. You didn't know your own college fund was gone? I asked, unable to keep the skepticism from my voice. I knew Dad had invested it for me, she said, making air quotes with her fingers. Right after I graduated. He said it would grow faster under his management than sitting in a basic trust account. I believed him. She gave a hollow laugh. I never thought to check. And the wedding costs? She shook her head, eyes dropping to her hands. Mom and Dad insisted on paying for most of it. Thomas's parents are contributing, but Dad was so adamant about handling the big expenses, the venue, the catering, my dress. He kept saying it was his gift to me, that I shouldn't worry about the money. The waitress arrived with my food, eggs, bacon, toast piled high on a plate designed for hungry college students pulling all-nighters. I picked up a piece of bacon, suddenly not sure if I could eat after all. Would you have done anything differently? I asked. If you had known? The question hung between us, heavy with implication. Vanessa didn't answer immediately. She stirred her tea slowly, methodically, buying time or gathering courage. 2 months ago, I wanted to postpone the wedding, she said finally. This wasn't what I'd expected. Why? Thomas and I have been fighting about money, about where to live after the wedding, about children. Big things, important things. She looked up, her eyes troubled. I went to Dad, told him I was having doubts, that maybe we needed more time. He wouldn't hear it. What do you mean? He said everything was paid for, contracts signed, guests invited. That it would be embarrassing to back out now, that Thomas comes from a good family with connections that could help his career. She took a shaky breath. He made it sound like I'd be ruining everyone's lives if I didn't go through with it. I remembered my father's face when he'd closed the door on me during the engagement dinner. The panic beneath the irritation, the desperation in his eyes. He wasn't just protecting a social event, he was protecting his entire facade. So you're going ahead with it? Even knowing where the money came from? She twisted the enormous engagement ring on her finger. I don't know what to do, Alexis, if I cancel now, after everything that's happened. After Dad stole my future to pay for your wedding, you mean? The words came out sharper than I intended, slicing through the tentative understanding that had been building between us. Vanessa flinched, but didn't look away. Yes, she said quietly. After that, I set down my fork with a clatter that drew glances from nearby diners. What did you think would happen when you came here tonight, Vanessa? That I'd absolve you? Tell you to go ahead with your dream wedding paid for with my stolen money? No. She reached across the table, stopping short of touching my hand. I came because I need to know what you want me to do. Because for once in my life, I want to choose my sister over what other people expect of me. The raw sincerity in her voice stopped me cold. This wasn't the polished, perfect Vanessa who always knew what to say, who always did what was expected. This was someone I barely recognized, vulnerable, uncertain, waiting for my verdict. What? I began, then paused, realizing I hadn't actually considered what I wanted from her. I'd been so focused on my parents' betrayal that I hadn't thought beyond my own immediate needs. I want to stay in school. I want what was promised to me. And the wedding? I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw not just my privileged sister who always got everything, but a woman caught in the same web of parental expectations and conditional love that had trapped me. The difference was that her gilded cage had looked like freedom until now. That's your decision, I said finally. But if you go through with it knowing what you know now, you're choosing them over yourself too. Vanessa was quiet for a long moment, turning her tea mug in slow circles. When she looked up, something had shifted in her expression, a determination I'd never seen before. I need to show you something, she said, reaching for her purse. She pulled out her phone, tapped the screen a few times, then handed it to me. It was an email from her to the wedding venue, time-stamped an hour before our meeting. Due to unforeseen family circumstances, we need to discuss options for postponing. Our event currently scheduled for May 15th. I sent similar messages to the caterer, the florist, and the photographer before coming here, she said. It's not canceled yet, but it's a start. I stared at the screen, then back at my sister. What about Thomas? Your guests? Dad? Thomas will understand, or he won't. The guests will get over it. She took a deep breath. As for Dad, I'm done. Letting his obsession with appearances dictate my life, and I'm done being the favorite daughter at your expense. For the first time in years, maybe ever, I saw my sister clearly, not as my rival or my parents' golden child, but as someone finding her own voice in the wreckage of our family's secrets. I reached across the table and took her hand. What? Now? A small, genuine smile touched her lips. Now we face them together. The confrontation happened on neutral ground, my grandmother's cottage at Willow Ridge. She arranged it, insisting on Sunday afternoon, serving tea and lemon cookies as if we were gathering for a pleasant family visit rather than a reckoning, and tea. Parents arrived precisely at 2, my mother clutching her handbag like a shield, my father's face already set in defensive lines. They faltered momentarily upon seeing Vanessa and me already seated at the small dining table, a united front where they'd clearly expected division. "Girls," my mother said, her voice artificially bright. "I didn't realize you'd both be here." My grandmother gestured to the empty chairs. "Sit down, Linda. Richard, we have matters to discuss." They obeyed with the reluctance of scolded children, my father's eyes darting between Vanessa and me, assessing, calculating how bad the damage might be. "I assume this is about the education funds," he said, straightening his cuffs. A nervous habit I'd noticed since childhood. "I've already provided the letter for Alexis's scholarship application, as requested." "This is about far more than the letter," my grandmother said. Her voice was calm, but beneath it ran a current of steel. "This is about trust, responsibility, the promises you made to your daughters and broke for your own benefit." My father shifted in his chair. "Mom, with all due respect, you don't understand the financial pressures." "Don't." My voice surprised. Even me, quiet but firm. "Don't make excuses, not anymore." My mother reached for my hand across the table. I pulled back before she could touch me. "Sweetheart, we made difficult choices during a difficult time," she said. "We always intended to make things right." "When?" I asked. "After I dropped out of school? After Vanessa was locked into a marriage she has doubts about? After you'd maintained your country club membership and your social standing at our expense?" My father's head snapped toward Vanessa. "Doubts? What is she talking about?" Vanessa sat straighter, the engagement ring conspicuously absent from her finger. "I've postponed the wedding, Dad, indefinitely." The color drained from my mother's face. "You can't. The deposits, the invitations—" "The deposits were paid with stolen money," Vanessa said, her voice steady despite the slight tremor in her hands. "And I'm not going to build my future on a foundation of lies." "This is ridiculous," my father said, anger finally breaking through his composed facade. "Postponing a wedding over a temporary financial shuffle? Do you have any idea how this will look? That's all you care about, isn't it?" I said. "How things look, not what they are." My grandmother placed her teacup down with a decisive click. "Richard, Linda, I've seen enough. You've betrayed your daughter's trust. You've stolen their futures to maintain appearances. And even now, you're more concerned with your reputation than the harm you've caused." My father's jaw tightened. "What exactly do you want from us, Mom? We can't conjure $60,000 out of thin air." "No, but you can sell the vacation property in Maine," my grandmother said calmly. My parents looked stricken. The Maine cottage had been their pride, their escape, the physical embodiment of their success. "That's been in the family for—" my mother began. "For 12 years, my grandmother cut in. "Purchased right around the time you started at the country club. It's worth considerably more than what you took from the girls." My father's face flushed dark red. "You have no right to dictate how we manage our assets." "And you had no right to take what wasn't yours," I said. "The choice is simple. Sell the cottage and restore our funds, or we'll take this matter further." "Further?" My mother's voice rose an octave. "What does that mean?" Vanessa spoke up, her voice steadier than I'd ever heard it. "It means I'll explain to Thomas's family exactly why the wedding is postponed. It means Alexis will explain to the scholarship committee exactly why she needs financial aid despite her parents' apparent wealth. It means your carefully constructed image crumbles," I added. Unless you make this right. My father stared at us. These daughters he thought he knew. These women he'd underestimated. I could see the calculations running behind his eyes. The cost of the cottage versus the cost of exposure, of shame, of consequences. "I'll call the realtor tomorrow," he said finally. Not an apology, not an acknowledgement of wrong, just a concession to preserve what he could of his precious reputation. My grandmother nodded once, satisfied but not surprised. "I'll expect proof of the listing by the end of the week." My mother dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. "I don't understand how we got here," she said. "We only wanted the best for our family." "No," I corrected gently. "You wanted the appearance of the best." "There's a difference." As they rose to leave, my father looking decades older than when he'd arrived, I felt no triumph, no vindication, just a hollow sadness for what our family had become, for the truth that had always lurked beneath the surface of our picture-perfect existence. Vanessa and I watched them go, side by side in my grandmother's front window. When their car disappeared down the winding road, she turned to me. "It's not going to be the same after this, is it?" she asked quietly. "No," I agreed. "It can't be." And somehow, that felt like progress. 3 days after the confrontation, Dr. Fung called me with news about the scholarship. I was restocking textbooks at the campus bookstore when my phone buzzed, and I nearly knocked over an entire display rushing to the back room to answer it. "Ms. Mitchell, this is Dr. Eleanor Feng from the Henderson Memorial Scholarship Committee." My heart hammered against my ribs. "Yes, hello. I'm calling to inform you that the committee has reviewed your application, including the unusual financial documentation provided by your father and grandmother." I held my breath, gripping the edge of a metal shelf for support. "After careful consideration, we've decided to award you the scholarship for the upcoming academic year." Relief crashed over me in a dizzying wave. My knees actually buckled, and I sank onto a stack of cardboard boxes. "Thank you," I managed. "I can't tell you what this means to me." "Your application was exceptional, Ms. Mitchell," Dr. Fung continued. "Your work with veterans, your academic record, your personal statement, all were compelling. The financial situation simply confirmed your need, which is a key criterion for our selection process." I wiped tears from my cheeks, embarrassed but unable to stop them. I was afraid I'd have to drop out. "That would have been a loss not only for you, but for the veterans you serve," she said. The committee was particularly moved by the recommendation from Maria Suarez at the support center. "She speaks very highly of your dedication." After the call ended, I sat in the dusty stockroom, surrounded by towers of textbooks, trying to absorb what had just happened. I could stay in school. I could continue my work at the Veteran Center. I could breathe. I texted my grandmother first. I got the scholarship. Her reply came seconds later. "Never doubted it for a minute, sweetheart." Then Vanessa. "Got the Henderson scholarship, full tuition for the year." Her response took longer but was worth the wait. "Yes." "This calls for celebration. Dinner tonight? I'll pick you up at 7. And I have news too." I finished my shift in a daze, floating through the motions of inventory and customer service. By closing time, word had spread among my co-workers, and even my normally stoic manager cracked a smile as he congratulated me. "Couldn't have happened to a more deserving person," he said, awkwardly patting my shoulder. "Don't forget us little people. When you're running the place someday." At home, I changed for dinner with Vanessa, opting for a simple dress I'd found at a thrift store rather than the practical jeans and sweaters that made up most of my wardrobe. A small celebration of my own. Vanessa arrived exactly at 7, but instead of her usual polished appearance, she looked different. Her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, minimal makeup, wearing jeans and a soft blue sweater I'd never seen before. "Congratulations, Scholar," she said, hugging me tightly in the doorway. "I'm so proud of you." "Thanks," I said, stepping back to look at her. "You look different." A small smile played at her lips. "Different good or different bad?" "Different real," I replied. "It suits you." She drove us not to one of the trendy restaurants she usually favored, but to a small Italian place on the edge of town. Family-owned, unpretentious, with checkered tablecloths and candles stuck in wine bottles. "I remember Dad bringing us here when we were kids," she said as we were seated in a corner booth. "Before he started caring so much about being seen at the right places." I studied the laminated menu, memories flooding back. "You always got the spaghetti with butter and complained about the green specks." "Parsley," she laughed. "I was convinced it was poison." We ordered actual spaghetti for Vanessa this time, complete with parsley, lasagna for me, and settled into a comfortable silence that would have been impossible a week ago. "So," I said finally, "you mentioned news?" Vanessa took a sip of water, gathering her thoughts. "I broke up with Thomas." "What? I thought you just postponed the wedding." She shook her head. "That was step one. I needed time to think, to figure out if I was marrying him for the right reasons or just following the script our parents wrote. And I realized I was with him because he looked good on paper. Right family, right job, right future." She traced a pattern on the tablecloth. "Not because I loved him. Not enough, anyway." I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. That took courage. "His parents were surprisingly understanding," she said. "His mother actually hugged me, said she wished she'd had the strength to make the same choice when she was my age." Our food arrived, steaming and fragrant. We ate in companionable silence for a few minutes, savoring the simple, honest comfort of good pasta and the newfound ease between us. "There's more," Vanessa said eventually. "I've decided to go back to school." I looked up, surprised. "For what?" "Education. I want to teach." She smiled, a genuine smile that lit her eyes in a way I hadn't seen in years. "Elementary school. I've always loved working with kids, but Dad said teaching wasn't ambitious enough." "When do you start?" "Fall. Semester, if I can get everything arranged in time." "And—" she hesitated. "I was wondering if you might want a roommate. My apartment is too expensive for a student budget, and yours is tiny," I finished for her. "But we could look for a new place, something in between." "I'd like that," she said softly. As we finished dinner, making plans for apartment hunting and class schedules, I realized something profound had shifted. The scholarship had secured my education, but this tentative rebuilding with my sister felt like an equally significant victory. When Vanessa dropped me off at my apartment later that night, she paused before driving away. "Do you think we'll ever forgive them?" she asked, her voice barely audible above the idling engine. I considered the question carefully. "I don't know. Maybe someday. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, and it doesn't mean going back to how things were." She nodded slowly. "I'm okay with that. Building something new instead of trying to fix what was broken." As I watched her drive away, I felt lighter than I had in years. The weight of trying to matter to people who couldn't see me had been lifted, replaced by the freedom of choosing my own path forward. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Dad listed the cottage today. We should talk soon about arrangements for restoring your funds." I didn't respond immediately. That conversation could wait. Tonight was for celebrating victories, not reopening wounds. Instead, I texted Maria, "Got the scholarship. Thank you for everything." Her reply made me smile. "Never doubted you for a second. The Veterans Center needs more warriors like you." Warriors. I liked that. Not victims, not footnotes. Warriors who fought for their rightful place, their education, their future. Warriors who refused to be seated by the kitchen door of their own lives. The main cottage sold faster than anyone expected. a cash offer above asking price from a tech executive looking for a summer escape. The irony wasn't lost on me. Another wealthy family creating picture-perfect memories in a place built on deceit. My father transferred the money without ceremony. No call, no explanation, just an email with the transfer confirmation and an attached spreadsheet showing the exact distribution. My original fund amount plus calculated interest, the same for Vanessa, with the remaining profit from the sale, kept by my parents. When I checked my account balance, the numbers seemed surreal. More money than I'd ever had access to, enough to finish my degree without the constant pressure of multiple jobs and mounting debt. The scholarship would cover my tuition. This money meant security beyond that. It meant choices. Vanessa and I found an apartment halfway between campus and the elementary school where she'd secured a student teaching position starting in the fall. 2 bedrooms, a small balcony overlooking a park, and a kitchen large enough for us to cook together. The rent was reasonable split between us, and for the first time, I didn't have to calculate exactly how many coffee shop shifts I'd need to cover my share. Moving day arrived on a sweltering Saturday in June. Maria and 2 volunteers from the DI. Veteran Center helped with the heavy lifting, along with Thomas, who surprisingly had remained friends with Vanessa after their breakup. My grandmother supervised from a folding chair, directing traffic and ensuring family photos were handled with care. Conspicuously absent were our parents. They'd offered to help, an olive branch extended via text message, but Vanessa and I had declined. This new beginning was ours to create, free from their influence and expectations. By late afternoon, the apartment was a chaos of boxes and mismatched furniture. My thrift store finds alongside the few pieces Vanessa had chosen to keep from her designer apartment. The contrast should have looked jarring, but somehow it worked. Practical and comfortable, like our developing relationship. Maria was the last to leave, pausing at the door to hand me a housewarming gift. A potted plant with deep green, leaves and a small white flower. Peace lily, she explained. Hard to kill even for someone working your schedule. And it filters the air. I hugged her, grateful beyond words for her support throughout the past weeks. I'll see you Monday at the center? Actually, she said, I wanted to talk to you about that. The Henderson Scholarship comes with an internship component. 20 hours a week working with veteran services on campus or in the community. I knew this, of course. It had been outlined in the acceptance letter. I assumed I'd be staying at the support center. Maria shook her head. I've recommended you for a position with the university's new Veterans Integration Program. They're developing comprehensive support services for student veterans, everything from academic advising to mental health resources. The director specifically asked for you after reading your scholarship application. That's... wow. I struggled to find words. Would I still see the veterans I've been working with? Many of them, yes. And you'd be helping shape a program that could benefit hundreds more. She squeezed my shoulder. It's a step up, Alexis. The kind of experience that builds a career. After Maria left, Vanessa and I collapsed onto our newly positioned couch, exhausted but content. She handed me a glass of cheap champagne she'd chilled in our empty refrigerator. To new beginnings, she said, raising her glass. And to choices that are actually ours, I added. We clinked glasses and drank, then sat in comfortable silence, watching the evening light filter through windows we'd yet to hang curtains on. Mom called me today, Vanessa said finally. Asked if we'd come to Sunday dinner next week. I tensed slightly. What did you tell her? That we'd consider it. She set her glass down on a box serving as a temporary coffee table. I'm not ready to write them off completely, but I'm also not ready to pretend everything's normal. Nothing about our family has ever been normal, I pointed out. We just didn't see it until now. True. She tucked her legs beneath her, looking younger without her usual polished exterior. Do you think we should go? I considered the question carefully. Part of me wanted to maintain the distance, to protect this fragile new reality we were building. Another part recognized that complete severance wasn't the answer either. Maybe, I said slowly, but on our terms, not at their house, with all the old dynamics and memories, somewhere neutral. Like Grandma's? Or a restaurant? Somewhere public where everyone has to behave? Vanessa laughed. Smart. Hard to maintain appearances while having a meltdown at Applebee's. The joke released some of the tension, and I found myself laughing too, the kind of genuine laughter that had been rare between us for years. As darkness fell, we unpacked essentials by lamplight: bed sheets, towels, coffee maker for morning. The physical work provided a welcome distraction from weightier thoughts about family reconciliation and boundaries. While hanging clothes in my new closet, I found the blue dress I'd worn to submit my scholarship application, the day my father had almost cost me everything with his negligence. On impulse, I took it off the hanger and dropped it into the donation bag by my door. New beginnings required shedding old skins. Later, as I lay in my new bedroom listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the apartment settling, my phone lit up with a text from my grandmother. Proud of you both. Remember, family is what you make it. Typed back, we're learning that every day. Thank you for showing us how. Her wisdom had been the cornerstone of our rebuilding, not just the practical help with confronting our parents, but the example she set of quiet strength and unwavering integrity. In her, I saw the woman I wanted to become, someone who stood firmly in her truth without becoming hardened by it. The scholarship had saved my education. My sister's courage had saved our relationship. But my grandmother's intervention had saved something even more fundamental: my belief that I deserved to be seen, that my future mattered, that some betrayals can be survived and even transformed into something stronger. As I drifted towards sleep, the weight of the past few weeks began to lift. Tomorrow would bring more unpacking, more decisions, more steps, toward the life I was choosing rather than the one assigned to me. But for tonight, this room, this moment, this peace, it was enough. The meeting with our parents happened on neutral ground as planned, a mid-range steakhouse 40 minutes from their home, deliberately chosen for its lack of connection to our family history. No memories lurked in these generic booths, no ghosts of familial expectations haunted the laminated menus. My mother arrived wearing the carefully composed expression she reserved for difficult social obligations. My father looked diminished. Somehow, his confident posture replaced by something less certain. They slid into the booth across from Vanessa and me, the table between us like a demilitarized zone. "Girls," my mother began, then caught herself. "Alexis, Vanessa, thank you for agreeing to meet us." The formality in her voice underscored how much had changed. Gone was the easy assumption of maternal authority, replaced by the cautious tone one might use with distant acquaintances. Our father cleared his throat. "The house looks different without the main photographs on the wall." Small talk, as if we'd gathered to discuss interior decorating rather than the collapse of our family's foundation. "Dad," Vanessa said quietly, "we didn't come to talk about the walls." He nodded, eyes dropping to the untouched water glass before him. "No, of course not." The server arrived, momentarily breaking the tension as we ordered. Simple meals, no alcohol, despite the temptation to blur the edges of this encounter. When we were alone again, the silence stretched uncomfortably. "I received the scholarship," I said finally. "And the money from the cottage sale." My father nodded. "Good. That's good." The transfer went through without issues then. More silence. The vast gulf between transaction and reconciliation had never been more apparent. "We owe you both an apology," my mother said suddenly, her voice catching. "A real one, not excuses or explanations." I glanced at Vanessa, surprised. This wasn't what we'd expected. My mother had always been the first to rationalize, to reframe family conflicts in the most flattering light possible. What happened wasn't a mistake or a temporary solution, my father continued, meeting our eyes for the first time. It was a betrayal of trust, of our responsibilities as parents. The admission hung in the air between us, unexpected and raw. Why? Vanessa asked, the simple question carrying the weight of years of accumulated hurt. Why risk everything? Our education, our trust, your reputation, for appearances? My father's hands trembled slightly as he reached for his water. Because I couldn't face failure. Not publicly. Not after building a career advising others on financial security. The firm was struggling, my mother added. Clients were leaving. Richard was at risk of being asked to retire early. So you sacrificed our futures to save face, I said, not as an accusation, but as a simple truth that needed voicing. My father didn't deny it. Yes, the honesty was startling in its simplicity. No defense, no justification, just acknowledgement of the harm done. I don't expect forgiveness, he continued. But I want you both to know that losing the cottage, facing the consequences of my actions, it's been clarifying, humbling. My mother reached across the table, stopping short of touching our hands. We're seeing a family therapist, both of us, learning to recognize the patterns that led us here. Our food arrived, providing a welcome distraction from the intensity of emotion building at our table. We ate in silence for a few minutes, the mundane act of sharing a meal together both foreign and familiar. Your grandmother tells us you're roommates now, my mother said eventually, her attempt at normalcy almost touching in its awkwardness. We are, Vanessa confirmed. It's going well. Better than we expected, I added, allowing a small smile. And your teaching program? My father asked Vanessa. Challenging, rewarding. She hesitated, then added, I should have done it years ago instead of that marketing degree I never wanted. The implication wasn't lost on him. He nodded slowly. You would have been an excellent teacher even then. The conversation continued, careful, measured, punctuated by long pauses and occasional glimpses of the people we might become to each. Other. Not the family we had been, with its hierarchy of favor and conditional love, but something more honest, more equal. As we finished our meals, my father paid the bill despite our protests. Please, he said, it's not an attempt to buy forgiveness, just a meal. In the parking lot, the moment of parting arrived with its own awkwardness. No one quite knew the protocol for ending such an encounter. We'd like to see you again, my mother said. When you're ready, no pressure. Vanessa and I exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between us. Maybe, I said. We'll let you know. It wasn't forgiveness, it wasn't reconciliation, but it was honest, and for now, that was enough. 6 months later, I stood at the podium in the university's conference center, a sea of faces looking back at me, fellow students, faculty, community members, and veterans attending the official launch of the campus Veterans Integration Program. When I first started volunteering at the Veteran Support Center, I began, my voice steadier than the flutter in my chest. I thought I was there to help others navigate complex systems. What I discovered was that service goes both ways. Every veteran who shared their story taught me about resilience, about fighting for what matters, about standing up when systems fail. In the second row, Maria nodded encouragingly. Beside her sat my grandmother, elegant in a blue suit she'd worn to my high school graduation years ago. Vanessa was there too, having rearranged her student teaching schedule to attend. The Henderson scholarship made it possible for me to stay in school when my own family resources disappeared, I continued, not flinching from the truth. But equally important was what it represented. Recognition that sometimes the path forward isn't the one we planned, and that's okay. I glanced down at my notes, then set them aside. The prepared remarks felt too formal for what I needed to express. This program we're launching today isn't just about helping veterans access benefits or navigate academic requirements. It's about creating a community where everyone is seen, where struggles aren't faced alone, where each person's future matters. As I outlined the program's components, peer mentoring, specialized academic advising, mental health resources, career counseling, I scanned the audience. In the back row, partially obscured by a support column, I glimpsed my parents. They hadn't told me they were coming. My father sat straight-backed, attentive, while my mother dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. Their presence was unexpected. We'd maintained careful distance since our dinner 3 months ago. Occasional text messages and one brief coffee with my mother, but nothing more. I finished my speech to warm applause, thanking the university administration, program donors, and most importantly, the veterans themselves for trusting us with their stories and their futures. The reception afterward buzzed with conversation as attendees enjoyed catered refreshments and toured the program's new office space. I moved through the crowd, accepting congratulations and answering questions, feeling a confidence I'd never experienced in my parents' carefully orchestrated social events. This was real. This was earned. Eventually, I found myself face to face with my parents near the refreshment table. My mother embraced me briefly, her perfume familiar, yet somehow belonging to another life. "We're so proud of you, Alexis," she said, her voice tight with emotion. "What you're doing here is remarkable." My father stood awkwardly, hands clasped behind his back. "Your speech was excellent, very compelling." "Thank you," I said, meaning it despite the lingering discomfort. "I didn't know you were coming." "We didn't want to presume," my father explained. "Your grandmother mentioned it and we hoped it would be all right." Something in his hesitation, the uncertainty in a man who had always projected absolute confidence, touched me unexpectedly. "I'm glad you came," I said, surprising myself with the truth of it. My father glanced around at the program office, taking in the resource center with its comfortable seating, the private counseling rooms, the bulletin board already covered with job opportunities and support group announcements. "You've built something important here," he said finally. "Something that will last." The words hung between us, laden with meaning neither of us could fully articulate. How building something lasting was all he'd ever wanted too. How differently we'd each pursued that goal. How much had been lost and learned along the way. My mother touched my arm gently. "We should let you get back to your guests. Perhaps we could have dinner sometime next week. With Vanessa too, if she's available." "I'd like that," I said, and found that I meant it. As they moved away, Vanessa appeared at my side, champagne flute in hand. "So," she said. That was civil. I accepted the glass she offered. "Progress, I guess." "Tiny steps," she agreed. "Speaking of which, I have news." "Good news?" "The best kind." Her smile was radiant. "I've been offered a teaching position for next fall, kindergarten at Oak Ridge Elementary." I hugged her, genuine joy rising like a tide. "That's amazing. The principal loved you from day one." "Thanks to your help with my application and interview prep." She looked around at the crowded reception, pride evident in her expression. "Look at us, little sister, building lives we actually want instead of lives we think we should have." As the event wound down, my grandmother found me, linking her arm through mine as we watched the last attendees depart. "Your grandfather would have been so proud today," she said, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "Not just of what you've accomplished, but of who you've become." I leaned against her slightly, drawing strength from her steady presence. "I wouldn't be here without you, Grandma. You showed me what it means to stand up for yourself without losing your compassion." She patted my hand. "You had it in you all along, dear. You just needed to find your voice." As we walked to the parking lot together, my grandmother, Vanessa, And I. The setting sun cast long shadows across the campus. Ahead of us stretched a future undefined by old expectations, unbound from past betrayals. Not perfect, not without complications, but authentically ours. The scholarship had saved my education. But in fighting for it, I discovered something far more valuable: the courage to define my own worth, to build connections based on truth rather than convenience, to stand firmly in the center of my own story, not by the kitchen door, not on the margins, but exactly where I belonged. That night, I sat on our apartment balcony, watching stars appear in the darkening sky. The day's events played through my mind: the successful program launch, my parents' unexpected appearance, Vanessa's teaching position. My phone buzzed with a text from Maria. "The director can't stop talking about how perfect you are for the program." "This is just the beginning," I smiled, typing back, "Thank you for believing in me before I believed in myself." A second message arrived, this one from my grandmother. "Your grandfather always said adversity reveals character. Yours shines brightly, dear one." The journey from that devastating moment in my parents' kitchen, learning my college fund had been emptied, to today hadn't been linear. There had been setbacks, tears, moments of doubt. But each challenge had stripped away another layer of need for external validation, revealing a core of resilience I hadn't known I possessed. Perhaps most surprising was the unexpected gift hidden within the betrayal: my relationship with Vanessa. No longer competitors for parental approval, we'd discovered genuine friendship, supporting each other through changes neither of us could have predicted. Our relationship with our parents remained complicated, a work in progress built on cautious honesty rather than blind trust. Some wounds heal slowly, leaving scars that remind us of lessons hard learned. But the greatest lesson wasn't about money or education or even family dynamics. It was about the power of standing firmly in your truth, even when voices around you insist you should sit quietly by the kitchen door while others take center stage. Sometimes the seat you're given isn't the one you deserve. And sometimes the signature you need isn't just on a scholarship form, but on your own declaration of worth. Have you ever had your future stolen by the people meant to protect it? Have you found yourself fighting for recognition in spaces where you should have belonged automatically? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Your story matters here, and if this journey resonated with you, subscribe for more real conversations about family, boundaries, and finding your voice when others try to silence it. We're building a community of truth tellers, one story at a time.